Hi, I'm Mario Washington-Ihieme, and I'm going to talk to you through key findings from Centre for London's latest London Intelligence publication, providing you with a snapshot of how Londoners are coping with the effect of coronavirus on their daily lives and how they feel about living in their city. Most employed Londoners were able to work more hours in September, as schools returned and sectors such as hospitality and retail reopened. As is often the case, our survey found that paid hours were lower than worked hours. Whereas 12% of Londoners actually worked for 10 hours or less, a larger 21% were paid for 10 hours or less. The recession continues to have an impact on a large portion of Londoners' disposable income. 42% said their income decreased due to COVID-19, unchanged since May. Our survey confirms that the financial hit from the recession has primarily affected groups with high risk of poverty. Younger and mid-career people, aged 25 to 44, BAME Londoners, tenants and particularly self-employed workers were more likely to say that their income has been negatively affected by coronavirus. Even though the worst of the unemployment rise has yet to come, the survey also highlights that 29% of Londoners say they're struggling to make ends meet, and 23% wouldn't be able to meet an unexpected expense of £500. A minority of Londoners, but a significant one, are pessimistic about their employment prospects and finances over the next year, whereas worries about employment prospects has increased a little since May. Those about personal finances have slightly receded. In response to lockdown, there's been a lot of press coverage about people wanting to leave London in recent months. However, our data shows that only 7% expect to leave London in the next year. This is unchanged since we last asked this in May. Despite expecting to stay living in the city, people are worried about the affordability of both renting and buying a home. Older Londoners are particularly worried about affordability for the younger generation. 80% of Londoners aged over 65 say rent is unaffordable for young people, whereas 29% of young people themselves say rents are unaffordable for them personally. Many say the recent flurry of mutual aid groups has revealed the latent goodwill in communities across London. 45% of Londoners say people help each other out in their neighbourhood, and this figure hasn't changed since May. But not all Londoners think the same, with homeowners and parents with children under 18 most likely to believe this. Even as the number of hours worked by employed Londoners has increased, suggesting that people are getting busier, over a quarter of Londoners have donated time to charity in the last month. People who actively practice a religion or identify as LGBTQ were much more likely to have volunteered for charity, as were Londoners with a disability and parents with children under 18, both groups whose lives have been heavily disrupted by the pandemic and lockdown. Since the spring, Londoners have had more options for activities outside the home, and a large majority had taken part in at least one in the month before our survey. More Londoners have been getting takeaways than going to restaurants, while gym attendance has been low, as have cinema and museum visits. People aged 65 plus and those looking for work were least likely to have done any of these activities. It seems that the barriers are a mixture of health concerns and financial worries. Our survey also found that only about half of Londoners feel very or quite comfortable going into central London. 16 to 34-year-olds are more likely than their older counterparts to feel comfortable, perhaps reflecting different levels of risk from coronavirus. We're going to keep tracking these questions as the months go by, so stay tuned for the next issue of the London Intelligence. This issue has been produced by Centre for London in partnership with Savanta. Thank you for listening.